the gap, standing for Jesus, standing in the gap for family and friends, standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in.
Jesus also gave us the Great Commission, and that is to spread this gospel, spread it to all the world, so everybody can have the benefit of this gospel. And it's called the Gap News. And we call it the Gap News because we want you to understand what's going on in current events today, so you can spread it in today's world. And to keep you up on that, we have dedicated a section of this to the Gap News. And Marvel's in charge of that to bring you the current events we need in order to spread the gospel. Marvel, are you ready?
Oh man, we always say there's so much going on in the world you can't figure out what to cover, and I have something sitting in the can ready to show whenever we can get not so much crazy news every week, but we've got crazy news this week, and it's all about the rule of law, the rule of law, the rule of law. So the people say that if we can maintain the rule of law, we can keep our democracy. So I'm going to call this one the rule of law.
Well, as you've heard, the breaking news of the night is that Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen has managed to visit the Maryland resident Kilmar Abrego Garcia, being held in prison in El Salvador in what the Trump administration admits was a mistake. Senator Van Hollen broke the news on Blue Sky, posting, quote, "I said my main goal of this trip was to meet with Kilmar. Tonight, I had that chance. I have called his wife, Jennifer, to pass along his message of love. I look forward to providing a full update upon my return." And of course, the president of El Salvador, in his wise guy mode, mocked the meeting with this tweet saying, "Kilmar Abrego Garcia miraculously risen from the death camps and torture, now sipping margaritas with Senator Van Hollen in the tropical paradise of El Salvador." And then at 9:01 p.m. tonight, President Bukele of El Salvador added this to his tweet, saying, "Now that he's been confirmed healthy, he gets the honor of staying in El Salvador's custody." Well, we will see about that. And of course, the president of El Salvador thinks tonight is a time to be mocking this prisoner that he's holding there and mocking this process. But his words are going to be used in court now in this case, as are Donald Trump's, and they are going to be helpful to Mr. Abrego Garcia, because what the president of El Salvador has demonstrated today is just how easy it is to get this person out of El Salvador, just how easy it is to control his movements in El Salvador and out of El Salvador. This will all be part of the case. J. Harvey Wilkinson III has 41 years of experience as a federal judge. He was appointed by Republican President Ronald Reagan in 1984. And in his 41 years of service, Judge Wilkinson maybe had a right to think he had seen it all. It must be difficult to shock the legal sensibilities of Judge Wilkinson at this point in his career, but he used the word shocking today, a word judges rarely use, to describe what the Trump team has done to Kilmar Abrego Garcia after they snatched him out of his car with his autistic 5-year-old child watching from the back seat, and then sent him to a deliberately cruel and unusual prison in El Salvador, where he may remain tonight. A 3-judge federal appeals court panel unanimously ruled against the Trump administration in the case today. Judge Wilkinson, writing the opinion, said, While we fully respect the executive's robust assertion of its Article 2 powers, we shall not micromanage the efforts of a fine district judge attempting to implement the Supreme Court's recent decision. It is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter, but in this case, it is not hard at all. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody, that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking, not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. The government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident of its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Moreover, the government has conceded that Abrego Garcia was wrongly or mistakenly deported. Why then should it not make what was wrong right? Making what was wrong right was the very purpose in the founders' creation of the American judicial system, which must always include due process of law. In today's unanimous ruling by the appeals court, Judge Wilkinson wrote, "The executive possesses enormous powers to prosecute and to deport, but with powers come restraints. If today the executive claims the right to deport without due process and in disregard of court orders, what assurance will there be tomorrow that it will not deport American citizens and then disclaim responsibility to bring them home?" Here's what Donald Trump said on Tuesday about sending American citizens to that very same deliberately and proudly cruel and unusual prison in El Salvador.
Could we use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
Would love to do it. Here's what Donald Trump said today.
We have a great relationship with the president of El Salvador. Will you ask him to release Abrego Garcia so that you can facilitate his return here to the United States? And do you believe he deserves due process here?
Well, I must tell you, I have to refer again to the lawyers. I'll have to do what they ask me to do. I had heard that there were a lot of things about a certain gentleman, perhaps it was that gentleman, that would make that case be a case that's easily winnable on appeal. So we'll just have to see. I'm going to have to respond to the lawyers.
Today, Donald Trump also said this about Mr. Abrego Garcia.
I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is.
We'll have to find out what the truth is. That's the reason we have due process. That is exactly what the phrase due process means. We'll have to find out what the truth is.
Well. So we've got the Supreme Court has said in response to a lower court that was appealed by the government, the Supreme Court has said in a unanimous decision. When do they ever give a unanimous decision anymore? In a unanimous decision, they said the government must facilitate the return of this gentleman who was snatched. He was abducted He had a legal ruling that he is not to be deported to El Salvador, and ICE knew it and snatched him up and put him on a plane with a lot of Venezuelan gang members. Well, now they're saying most of them aren't gang members. They're just Venezuelan guys, brown guys. That's who they are, brown guys. And deport him to what sounds like and looks like a horrible prison. So the Supreme Court said the government must facilitate his return. All the levels of courts have said this was wrong. The government, he got fired, the lawyer that said, well, we made a mistake in deporting him. They fired him right away for telling the truth. But here's a situation where the United States government made a mistake, and now they refuse to cure it. And they keep trying to say he's this and he's that and he's the other thing. But there have been court proceedings that gave him the right to remain in the United States and by any means not to be deported to El Salvador. And let's not even talk about the other. I think they're saying it's like out of the 230 some people that were flown over and dropped into this horrible prison. Now they're saying it looks like maybe about 172 of those brown men have nothing to do with any gang. They have no convictions. They're not criminals. They're just brown men. What do you think, honey?
Well, I think people ought to be very, very upset about what's going on with this this situation. Not only the one man, but all the others that have been snatched in without due process. You know, as an attorney, I deal with due process all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Due process is the only thing between democracy and authoritarianism. And due process basically is this: is you can't just take people without giving them a chance to defend themselves. And that chance to defend yourself has to be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't snatch them and give them 10 minutes to defend themselves and then put them on an airplane. And so what this administration is doing is just blatantly illegal, and the Supreme Court needs to stand up for it. I saw that they had put on a stay this morning for a number of those immigrants who were in danger of being transported away. They were loading them on the buses and moving them and all that, trying to move them from one jurisdiction to the other to get them out of the jurisdiction of this court. And then they'd have to run over here and file something in the other court, in the Supreme Court, except for two of them.
Oh, we know who they are.
Said you can't do that.
Uh-huh.
You got to give them meaningful due process. So, you know, some people say due process, due process. That's the only thing that really has saved us as black people.
Oh, yes.
And so, you know, you all understand due process, but also understand this. Regardless of due process, God has instituted due process. Truth. Micah 6:8.
Truth.
Due justice. What they did with this man and these people, that's not justice.
Not justice.
And it's not mercy.
No.
And though they have the power to do this and do that, they're not doing it humbly with God.
Not at all.
They have a better way to do it. We don't need to wait on what God's talking about. We're going to do it because we have the power to do it. We don't care about any consequences. Well, you know what? A lot of times you get your consequences while you're still living, but you definitely get them when it's time for judgment. So it's going to play out.
It's going to play out. And you know, Justice Sotomayor, in that first unanimous decision, she said, if they can do this to him, they can do that to you and me. And you heard Trump say, I'd love to do that. I'd love to, somebody that hit somebody over the head with a baseball bat, I'd like to send them to a prison in El Salvador. And I mean, hitting somebody with a baseball bat is not Right. It's a crime. Yes, it's a crime. But we're going to send them to somewhere like this. And what they're saying is that the people who, the El Salvadorans that are in that prison, ain't never getting out. So now we've sent our residents of the United States, whether they are legally here or not legally here, we've sent them to this hellhole. And we think that's okay. It's so cruel. It's so crass. It's so mean. But that's who our leadership is.
All right.
I'm just looking. Okay, nobody had any additional comments. You always are welcome, even when you join us later on in the day. You can put your comments in there. We'll see them. We'll respond to them. But this here is we're talking about the rule of law. We're talking about due process, and we have to stand up for it. We have to stand up for it. We have to press our legislators, our Congress. They've been pretty weak-kneed and spineless so far, but we have to keep pressing them. Don't let this happen. Don't let this happen. And I would like to see the first judge, I forget his name, the one who said, turn those planes around. I want to see his ruling take place, and they get all of those men and bring them back over here and let them have an opportunity to defend themselves, to prove, are they in a gang? Are they not in a gang? If they are convicts, whatever, but let everybody have due process like they should, and get things back on an even keel. Okay, that's
Gap
all I
news.
got.
Gap
That's the
news.
Gap News.
You should be able to apply the gospel to that.